All right, well, I'd like to thank the Buckley Institute and Yale University for the invitation to be here at today's debate. It is an honor to be here. The free exchange of ideas, especially some of the most controversial ones, are paramount to the health and the future of our republic. And I'd like to commend the Buckley Institute, the staff, for your work to safeguard those precious freedoms. I'd like to start the opening here with a quote, and it goes this way. Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we are also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous. That's why over the past 6 years, deportations of criminals are up 80%. Now, that was President Obama in 2014 describing his deportation efforts and calling for accountability for all illegal aliens, though he used the politically correct yet inaccurate term undocumented immigrant. I agree with President Obama and with President Trump, who has called for exactly the same thing, except to a greater degree. The difference is President Obama did not come into office after 4 years of Joe Biden, and the media was never interested in holding him accountable. Mass deportation and immigration policy is undoubtedly a primary issue in the modern era, being litigated in the public sphere, in legislatures, in academia across the Western world. And I don't dispute that it elicits some strong emotions on both sides of the political aisle. But today I contend that mass deportation, which I define as a challenging effort to lawfully and humanely remove persons with no legal status here in the United States, is necessary for three core reasons. First, the ability to choose who can immigrate, visit, or naturalize into the country is a fundamental right of America and virtually every other country on earth. And I would say even my opponent doesn't dispute this, as he's argued that America should screen immigrants for national security threats as well as for potential public health concerns. So no country on earth has purely open borders, but rather a sliding scale of restrictions on entry and citizenship. Countries like Sweden, Norway, Germany, Japan, Denmark have significant restrictions on immigration and are only getting more restrictive over the last 10 to 15 years. Without an enforced border, without immigration enforcement of those who cross that border illegally, protecting our sovereignty becomes impossible. Now, some may view America as simply a parcel of land bound by government-defined lines, but I do not. I believe our citizenry are the core of who we are and what we are as America. And we have every right to choose who comes into our country, and that includes who should not be allowed to stay in our country. Second, mass deportation is the only legal and logical response to a mass illegal entry. We had a historic border crisis for 4 years under President Biden, and that must be met with a historic response. Put simply, America has never seen an immigration crisis as we did. Most estimates are about at least 11 million individuals entered the country illegally during those 4 years. That's 3 times the population of Connecticut, including thousands of known or suspected terrorists, gang members, and other violent criminals. Now, I don't contend that all 11 million of those individuals have committed additional crimes while here in the United States, but I will touch on that in just a minute. My third point is democracy demands it. Immigration policy decisions belong to the people and their elected representatives, not foreign governments, not big businesses, or anyone else. In 2024, again, following Joe Biden's 4 years in office, the American people spoke loud and clear, and they wanted mass deportation. And even today, a year into the Trump administration, recent poll came out that 70% of the American people still support deporting criminal illegal aliens. And as we consider the notion of is mass deportation necessary, I contend the true debate in the country today is whether we should deport every person without legal right to be here, or we decide to pick and choose which laws we enforce. Should we only remove criminal illegal aliens, thereby waiting on other illegal aliens to commit a crime here in the United States before we deport them? Now, I'd like to ask you if you know 2 individuals, Johan Jose Martinez Rangel and Franklin Jose Pina Ramos. Just by a show of hands, anybody heard of those names? These two names are two Venezuelan illegal immigrants who strangled, sexually assaulted, and murdered a 12-year-old girl, Jocelyn Nungare, in a ditch in 2024 in Texas. Neither man had a criminal history. Both were apprehended at the U.S. border, and both were released under the Biden administration, and that was a policy decision. In the case of one of those men, he was released just weeks before committing that heinous crime. So I strongly believe, if you can't tell by now, that no one should be exempt from the enforcement of our immigration laws. And I would say that's what mass deportation is, enforcement of our immigration laws. I also contend at times it's painful, it's unsightly, and it's even costly. But we cannot and we should not pick which laws to enforce, or at least the executive branch should not. Now, some may wish that our immigration laws to be different. They may wish for more legal avenues of immigration. They may wish that ICE would do their job in a different way, or maybe they have different detention standards at ICE. Those are all legitimate debates to have, but that's not the debate we're having today. America has a right through its people and its elected representatives to choose our own laws and to enforce those laws. So again, I contend that mass deportation is necessary to preserve our nation's sovereignty because of the historic crisis that we saw under President Biden, and because the American people deserve policies that reflect their decisions at the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm David Beer. As was mentioned, I'm Director of Immigration Studies. Thank you, Tori. Thank you to the Buckley Institute, and thank you all for being here. So is mass deportation necessary? Mass deportation entails the indiscriminate removal of anyone who can be deported without regard to their current legal status or individual merits. We'd be better off letting Elon Musk blast all the money into outer space. Is mass deportation necessary for our security? No, it explicitly entails deporting the peaceful alongside the threatening. DHS has said that less than 4% of the illegal immigrant population has a criminal record of any kind, many of which are just traffic or immigration offenses. Yes, many committed a crime by entering illegally, but since then, nearly all haven't been bothering anyone. And there's no valid security reason for seeking them out now. Why would we want law enforcement to waste any time at all on arresting peaceful people when half of all murders, most rapes, and nearly all property crimes in the United States go unsolved? When you waste money deporting a gardener, you're stealing justice from victims of serious crimes. Why not spend all the resources on serious criminals? And once we arrest and deport all the threats, what's the argument for going after the rest? Is it necessary for our prosperity? No, it will drive up prices almost everywhere as less food, goods, and services are produced. American managers and supervisors will be forced to do more dangerous and lower paid work now performed by immigrants. Without as many consumers, many businesses will close. Without as many workers, many businesses will move overseas. The origin of wealth creation is the specialization of labor, which, as Adam Smith noted, is limited by the number of people in a market. We should want more workers making more stuff for us. Is it necessary to reduce the debt? No, the Congressional Budget Office estimated that the surge of illegal immigration under Biden will reduce the deficit by nearly $1 trillion over 10 years. My research for the Cato Institute has shown that illegal immigrants have reduced the federal, state, and local deficits by $1.7 trillion over the last 30 years. Regardless, mass deportation means expelling the contributors alongside the takers. If we deported all welfare users, they'd stop using welfare, and then we wouldn't deport anyone. But that's not what the mass deportationists want. Is it necessary to protect our rights? No, mass deportation violates our rights in virtually every way imaginable. Every day in America today, masked agents detain, interrogate, threaten, and arrest U.S. citizens who fail to produce documents on the street. ICE is breaking into homes and dragging U.S. citizens from their homes without judicial warrants. Even normal deportations violate our rights. Every day, DHS deports spouses and parents of U.S. citizens. It deports our employers, employees, renters, landlords, customers, clients, neighbors, and friends. Mass deportation is a war against us as much as it is against immigrants. Is it necessary to enforce the law? Of course not. Illegal immigration exists because of the lack of legal options to come. Just 3% of people applying for green cards in 2024 actually received one. We could just let people come and stay legally as we did for generations before the 1920s. If we want the law enforced, we should want people to have a way to follow the law. Instead, the current administration has stripped millions of people of their legal status and has banned most legal immigration to the United States right now. None of that is necessary. It's a choice, a poor choice. Immigrants are just people, people with enough entrepreneurial spirit to move from one country to another. It is no more necessary to suppress their basic rights than to suppress any other randomly selected group. Any major group, from Texans to Pepsi drinkers to Yale grads, has some scumbags. No offense. And some of these groups may have more scumbags than others, like those Harvard guys. But all anyone is entitled to is to be treated on their own merits, as an individual, not as part of some undifferentiated mass. That's all that's truly necessary in a free society. Thank you.
There's a lot there. I would say a couple different things. I appreciate those remarks. As I said in some of my opening, that's a system that doesn't currently exist. So that's nice. It's nice to think about that. It's nice to say everyone should be able to come to the United States. If they want to come on their own. That's not our laws. That's not what Congress has said. That's not the immigration system that they have created. That's maybe what some people want to see, but that is not the current state. And so if you're in the executive branch, if you're President Trump or even President Biden or President Obama or whoever, your job is to enforce those laws. Your job is to make sure that the immigration law passed by Congress is enforced. And we saw for 4 years, when you decide not to enforce that over 11 million individuals will come. And so I ask, how many is enough? How many can come illegally can the U.S. continue to absorb? Because I can tell you, we are one of the, we are still the country that most people want to come to. And I get accused a lot, and I think others do, that share my view that somehow, we don't like immigrants, we don't think much of them. That could be further from the truth. It's just there's a legal way to come, and then there's an illegal way to come. And I don't disagree. We probably need to increase legal pathways. We need to have that debate in Congress so that they can come legally. But when you choose to break the law, there has to be a consequence, because if there is no consequence, then that 11 million that we saw under Joe Biden will be 20 million under the next president, and then 30 million, and then 40 million. And then the question becomes, who are they? They are, again, 4 years under Biden, there were known or suspected terrorists came in because our law enforcement was overwhelmed. So that's kind of a big rebuttal. My opponent talked about ICE breaking into homes, talked about ICE targeting. None of that happens. That happens when you view what you see on TV through one lens and you don't understand the operational requirements. Everyone that ICE is picking up is a target. They know who they are, they know where they live, and they're going out and execute a criminal operation. Now, if they pull someone over that's driving, yes, they need to make sure that those other individuals in that car are not wanted criminals, so they will ask for ID. Some of them may be U.S. citizens. As soon as they figure out they're U.S. citizens and they're not wanted by other law enforcement agencies, they will let them go. If they are U.S. citizens and they are wanted by the local law, they will arrest them. I think we've gotten to this notion that ICE is somehow not a law enforcement agency. It's not true. They have arrest authority, they carry a gun, they carry a badge, they can arrest they can arrest U.S. citizens. They can. That is not their primary mission. They should be looking for those criminal illegal aliens. So I'm sure we'll get into it more. I've got a lot more to say, but that's probably going to take 2 minutes.
Look, the main point that we heard is that the only logical way to deal with this problem is to send out the masked agents to our population and start pulling people from homes and dragging them away and causing all the economic turmoil and chaos that we're witnessing on the streets throughout our country. And that is not the most logical thing to do. Look, in 1990, Congress passed a law that capped the number of driver's licenses nationwide at a certain level that was sufficient to meet demand in 1990, then didn't update it for the next 36 years, how many people on the roads would be illegal drivers today? We'd have millions of illegal drivers because there wouldn't be enough driver's licenses to meet demand. That is exactly, precisely the situation with our immigration system today. In 1990, Congress passed a law. They capped the number of green cards that they were going to issue and said no more. And they haven't revisited that law in 36 years. And so, yeah, there's lots of people in our country who are here illegally. And the best response, the response that respects the rule of law the most, would be to create a process whereby they can register their presence, they can show that they have a clean record, and that they merit some grace. And ultimately, if you do that, then we can have law enforcement focus on serious criminals, on people that we both agree should be the priorities for deportation. That's the most logical approach, and it does respect democracy and the rule of law to do so. How many can we absorb? How many immigrants can we absorb? Right now, immigrants are about 15% of our population. In Canada, they're over 22% of their population. In Australia, they're over 30% of their population. We can absorb a lot of immigrants. We are a large country, and we actually should want to absorb more. Our population would be in decline, or at least our working age population would be in decline today without immigrants. We need people who want to come and work and contribute to this country. In order for us to reach the foreign-born share in Canada, we need 35 million people to show up here tomorrow. Obviously, that's insane. It's not going to happen. But just to show you the scale of how restricted our immigration policy has been for the last century. If you go back to the early 20th century, we routinely allowed more than 1% of the population to be new legal immigrants, permanent immigrants, with a path to citizenship. Now, that would be over 3.3 million people per year today. We can absorb a lot more than we are, and we should revisit these broken laws. We both agree they're not working, and rather than just focus on how broken they are and just doubling down with billions of dollars on deportations. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. We'll move into the question part of our debate today. I want to start us off with something that you've both talked about, and I think this gets at the allocation of resources question. Having both acknowledged that the laws are perhaps not in effect the way that they ought to be, or that they need to be updated, et cetera, there is a question that is begged by, the necessity part of our wording that is, I think, the feasibility of what both of you are suggesting as the solution to, the immigration situation that we're dealing with. So with, in the case of Mr. Wolf, the question of, are we allocating our resources to ICE, which right now is polling very poorly among the American populace, which, as you emphasize democracy, this would be a question there. And then also, Mr. Beer, as you have focused on kind of an economic argument, the fact that all of these immigrants coming in will also lower wages in certain border states and cities, and possibly drive up housing costs, something that we're dealing with right now, that there's going to be some costs some cost problems on both sides in the question of democracy and economics, which you've talked about. I'm wondering if you can speak more to the feasibility of the solution you're proposing and why it is still better despite some of the costs that the American populace is going to have to absorb or stomach in the process of carrying out those kind of new solutions.
You want me to start? I'll kick it off. As I said, I think the contention there was ICE is polling badly. I think there's two things to keep about the mission of ICE, again, given to it by Congress. 57%, or sorry, higher Americans believe that violent or that criminal illegal aliens should be removed. That is the mission of ICE. It's one of their missions, but it's one of their primary missions. And so I argue that the American people still want ICE to do their job. Now, where you do see polls coming down is the manner in which they're doing it, right? So in places like Minneapolis, what they see on TV, they don't like that. They don't like the chaos. They don't like that. I contend that you don't see that around the country. Well, that's curious. Why don't I see that same chaos in Minneapolis in a place like Houston, Texas, or Jacksonville, Florida? It's because local police will cooperate with ICE in those jurisdictions. It's in sanctuary jurisdictions where they put policies that impede ICE from doing their job, requires ICE to go outside of a jail setting, go into neighborhoods more aggressively with more officers, and you start to get more chaos and you start to get more people. So the answer isn't we need to restrict ICE, we need to give them less money. It's actually we need the local police to cooperate with them, and then you'll likely never see them because they do most of their work in a jail setting, which is very, very safe. Now, your second part of your question, I think, is it's costly. There's a lot of things in this world that are costly. There's a lot of things in this world that are very difficult to do. That's not to say we shouldn't do them, right? The Cold War was costly. Defeating ISIS was costly. A lot of things that the United States does is costly, but upholding the rule of law, making sure that we understand who is in our communities and removing those individuals that are a public safety threat, a national security threat, that have a final order of removal. I'm happy to talk about that. A variety that have seen immigration judges have had their due process in a court of law, multiple courts. They've seen an immigration judge. They've been to an immigration court of appeal. They've likely seen a circuit court. And in some cases, they go to the Supreme Court. And yet all of those courts, in many instances, not all, but in many instances say that that individual has no legal right to be in the United States. But what we're being told now is we have to wait for that individual to commit yet another crime here in the United States before they're targeted for deportation. And that's something that I disagree with. So yes, is it costly? Sure. I think we saw last year a reconciliation bill passed that gave ICE a lot more funding, gave CBP a lot more funding. But again, and I'll end on this, that's what the American people voted for. That's why they elected President Trump, to right the wrong of 4 years under President Biden, and that's what they're getting.
I mean, look, the feasibility of what I'm proposing is vastly cheaper than the alternative. Right now, we are spending, 4 out of every 5 federal law enforcement dollars is going to this deportation, border policing complex. 4 out of 5. That is completely out of whack compared to the importance of what they're doing. Look, I want to solve murders. I want to get violent criminals off the street. But you look at what is actually happening when they go to Minneapolis or they go to LA or Chicago or any of these places. Who is the marginal person? This is the important point. Who is the marginal person that the Department of Homeland Security picking up? Is it the violent criminal who has murdered and raped people? No. The marginal person, the next additional person that they are arresting is a gardener, it's a landscaper, they're going to construction sites, they're poaching people at Home Depot. What he's describing in terms of how ICE operates is how ICE operated when he was secretary or acting secretary of DHS. It is not how they act today. That is not how they operate. And you look at the increase in arrests in these places, over 90% people without any criminal conviction or criminal history. And so that is, I think, when you think about the feasibility, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to accomplish similar things. We want security in the United States. We want to improve the prosperity of the United States, I think the best way to do that is to get people to voluntarily put their information forward to the federal government, submit to background checks, allow us to sort out the people who want to hide because they have something to hide from the people who don't. That is the most feasible and the least costly option. It won't require, I won't ask $170 billion of you to do that. I can do it for much less than that. And in fact, I can do it for free because all the immigrants would be willing to pay for that opportunity.
Again, I think, sorry, 2 seconds. This is either about the rule of law or it's not. And so criminals, I think we can both agree on, violent individuals, but the gardener, the whoever else, if they have a final order of removal, and there's about 1.5 million illegal aliens here in the United States that have a final order of removal, they've had their due process. They've been in a court. And what he wants you to say is that none of that matters. None of that matters. That they've made their case before a judge. The judge says you don't deserve or you're not entitled to any protections under U.S. law. You came here illegally. You need to remove yourself from the country. They've decided not to for obvious reasons. And somehow we're supposed to say that's fine. That's okay. And I think the vast majority of Americans say, I'm not for that.
Mr. Beard, this question is directed more towards you. Having focused in your statements on kind of the economic boosts that can come from your proposed solution, I wonder if you'd answer the question of culture that some people are concerned about. When you look at countries in Europe that have dramatically, well, they've had very open border policies and have started to have strong anti-immigrant sentiment, arise within them and start to, they've started to close their borders. Sweden, Germany, these places that have kind of had an influx of immigrants, and they've been very unhappy with the way that their culture has kind of been, moderated and changed. Of course, these places are much smaller. I'm wondering if you'll answer how either the economic, boost that you propose will outweigh any sort of immigration concerns that people have on that side of things, or why it's still worth it.
Yeah, I mean, culture, that's a huge topic. I mean, it could be everything from people being concerned about people speaking Spanish on a train to how people vote to, many different things. But when I look at Europe and the difference between Europe and the United States, we have a tradition of assimilating people from every culture, country, religion, a tradition and history grounded in assimilation. And the power of the American program is attractive to the people who come here, the people who participate in our society. And you look at what happened in the late 19th and early 20th century, all the same tropes were rolled out. They said the same thing about the Catholics that they say about the Muslims who are coming today. They said these are the people who are absolutely opposed to any kind of religious freedom. You listen to what the popes were saying in the 19th century. They were denouncing democracy and freedom of religion. And there was understandable concern. Are these people going to create their own separate society? They're creating their own school system. Instead of Catholics changing the United States, American Catholics, changed the Catholic Church. They realized, they proved that religious freedom works. And they ultimately changed the position of the Catholic Church in the 1960s to actually be in favor and be one of the greatest spokespersons for religious freedom in the world. And so there is an attraction to our system that results in assimilation. It's built on birthright citizenship, the fact that everyone who's born here understands they're an American from birth has a great deal to do with why our system's better than the ones in Europe, which are built on race rather than grounded in the fact that you are born here, it makes you an American.
I have one last question, and this will be directed towards you, Mr. Wolf. I think there's an argument to be made that the sudden enforcement of a law that has been laxly enforced for a while could also perhaps constitute some form of injustice, and the question of how stringently we're applying this to, what kind of immigrant is illegally here in the country. There seems to be a general intuition among Americans that, the immigrant who's been here for a year or 2 years, at least those who are in favor of this sort of policy, should be deported, but that my neighbor Todd from down the street who's been here for 20 years should be treated differently than that immigrant who recently entered. Could you speak to kind of the perhaps differing levels of justice in the application of this sort of law and how you see that still being okay?
Well, I think what you outline again is something I've said now a couple of times, which is it's an immigration system, the one we have or the one we wish we had. And if you're ICE, if you're a law enforcement officer, if you serve in the executive branch, you don't get that ability to choose an immigration system that you would like. You are charged, your duty, your oath is to enforce the law as passed by Congress. And so, you know, again, I hear this a lot, which is we shouldn't enforce the law here or there. And I go back, and I know I've said it a lot, and you probably, you know, may be tired. If you go back to Joe Biden, 4 years, one of the first things they did, President Biden did, I think it was through the secretary, said, if you simply cross the border, that alone is no longer a reason to deport you. And so basically what they said is, I'm going to ignore the law, right? I'm just going to ignore that. And what we saw is that's a signal to everyone else who wants to come to the country illegally. If I cross the border, as long as I don't commit another crime, well then I'm not going to be a target for deportation. They aren't coming after me, and I'll be good to go. And again, I think Americans have an inherent fairness kind of notion, and they say that's not right, you know. And even legal immigrants that come to the United States, and we are the most welcoming country in the world. Over 1 million, on average, 1 million green cards are issued every year by the United States, regardless of the administration, Obama, Biden, Trump, whoever. One of the most welcoming countries. All we're asking is that you do it the legal way. Yes, it's tough. Yes, it's difficult. It's even costly, and it's time consuming. So yes, we can work with Congress to do all that, but the answer, it can't be. The answer cannot be, I don't want to wait that long. So I'll just come in illegally, and if I stay here for 5 or 10 years or pick a number, and I don't commit another crime, then I just need to be given a free pass, and I should be able to stay here in the United States. Again, that is not immigration law. That's a make-believe law, or a make-believe notion of what we think this should be, and it really doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet.
Could I just say something about this really canard that we're just enforcing the law, and you know, if Congress wants to change the law, we'd be fine with that. No, they passed a law last year. They changed the law last year. They passed an immigration bill that included lots of changes to the law, lots of changes to the legal immigration system, $170 billion worth of funding. They changed the law to make it easier to round people up and deport them and restrict legal immigration. So the idea that it's just, we're agnostic about what the law is, they're not agnostic. They want a certain agenda, which is restricting legal immigration, restricting the rights of people to stay in the United States. You look at all the policies that have been enacted over the last year. They've banned over half of all legal immigration to this country through executive orders. There was no new laws passed, but they did it anyway. They have removed legal status from over 2.5 million people who had legal status on January 20th, 2025, and they've taken it away. So the idea that they're just enforcing the laws and they're just out there just enforcing like mindless drones. This is totally divorced from reality and what we've actually seen over the last year.
So he just made my case, which is you go to Congress and you get a law passed and then you enforce that law, right? And so he's right. Trump administration got a law passed last year. They got not only more resources, but different changes in immigration law. And now they're enforcing that law because that's what the American people voted for. You can say, oh, I didn't vote for it, granted. But that's what the majority of the American people voted for.
Thank you both so much. We'll move into our audience question portion of the event. If you have a question, please raise your hand and George will bring you the mic. Remember, it won't amplify your voice. Please keep your questions concise so that we can get through as many as possible and respectful as always.
I'll come around. Good afternoon. Thank you. Just 3 quick questions here for you, Mr. Beer. One, I guess, is to your point of crimes going unsolved, and I guess part of that would be how does having people who we do not have within our system itself go to helping solve those unsolved crimes. To the question of cheaper labor, of kind of inflating the cost of things by not having people working here illegally, is that actually pointing out a problem with deportation, or is that pointing out a problem with minimum wage laws and kind of labor requirements? And then a third is the question of legal options being limited when it comes to legal immigration. Is that not actually made even worse by kind of flooding the market, as it were, with people who are here illegally, thus kind of forcing us to limit space for those who would want to come here legally?
Yeah, on the last point, it's not a zero-sum game. There is not some magical number that says this is how many people that should exist in the United States. If we knew that number, then Congress would have set an appropriate limit and a flexible limit that reflects actual needs of the country, and it has not. So the idea that there's crowding out, or no, we can have a legal immigration system that works and a process by which we allow people to get legal who are already here in the United States. I'm not really sure, I wasn't really clear on the second question on the minimum wage. Look, almost nobody in the United States makes $7.25 an hour. This is, it's like a fraction of a percent. So the minimum wage really isn't the thing that sets wages in the United States. What sets wages in the United States is the productivity of American workers, not the government, not the number of workers in the United States. The number of people who are in a country has nothing to do with the wage level of that country. It is all about how productive the people are. And so when new people come here, the reason why they aren't getting paid what they're paid in Haiti is because they're much more productive than they are in their home countries. So wages are not based on the number of people in a market. They're based on how much an individual produces and how much they're worth in a market economy. In terms of solving crimes, look, I actually agree that it would be better if we knew who everyone was in the United States. I think from a law enforcement standpoint, that's a good thing. That's why I proposed registering people, allowing that process. We've done a registration for immigrants in the United States at least 7 times since 1929 was the first one that they did. We just haven't done it in the last 4 decades. So we should have that process set up and then go forward with a legal immigration system that actually works.
Thank you both. Mr. Wolf, this question's for you. One of the main harms you attribute to illegal immigration is crime. You describe stories of illegal immigrants committing violent crimes, and you say one of the main reasons for mass deportation is to reduce crime. So I have 2 related questions. The first is, do illegal immigrants empirically commit more crimes than U.S. native-born citizens? And if not, what other harms does immigration cause that outweigh some of the benefits, such as reducing debt and contributing to the working population posited by Mr. Beer? So my question is, what is the practical harm to this country caused by illegal immigration?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, which is, and I think David makes it, which is illegal aliens commit less crime than native-born. Okay. I think we should go after everyone who's committing a crime, whether they're born here in the United States or they're an illegal alien. But this idea or this notion, again, that, well, illegal aliens commit less, so therefore maybe we shouldn't focus on removing them I just reject that, right? Which is why you have ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is there to focus on a very select population and to make sure that they're following the law, and if not, removing them. We're not, for the most part, most law enforcement around the country is not doing the job of that ICE is doing. Are they assisting them? Are they allowing them to go into their jails? Yes, they're doing certain things. But that's why ICE is created, is to go after that illegal alien population and remove them from the country. So I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it's because, well, our resources would be better dedicated to just looking at, U.S. citizens that commit crimes. You need to do both. It would be my contention, and so that's what they're currently doing. I think I forgot your second part of your question, but what I will say, based on an earlier comment, is this idea of folks coming in, doing hard work, staying here, contributing to the economy. I don't disagree with any of that. Again, I would say come here legally. Come here the right way. Don't come here the wrong way. And I would also kind of deposit this for folks to think about. If unlimited number of illegal aliens came to the United States, and it's such a boon to the economy, why didn't the economy just take off under 4 years of Joe Biden? I don't know. Instead, what I heard were mayor after mayor saying, I need more money to house the influx of individuals coming into the country. I need more money from the federal government, not less money. I need more money coming. And so that's what happens when it's an influx. When you don't regulate it, when you don't know who they are, you don't know where they're going, it makes it very difficult, not only on law enforcement, but on public safety officials, on your healthcare system, on your education system. You're now going to have an influx of individuals and children specifically in a particular community that do not speak English. So you now need more teachers that don't speak English, flexing into that community. So if you just sort of throw the doors open and allow whoever to come in, I think there's a lot of harms to the country, and the harms outweigh the benefits.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment. He mentioned the two Venezuelan guys who killed someone. He didn't mention the two Venezuelans in New York City who stopped a stabbing of an American woman on a train. Look, there are bad people in any population, and there are good people in any population, and we should treat people as individuals, which is the main point of what I'm advocating for, rather than sort of the indiscriminate approach, which is just, you're an immigrant, we can deport you, and therefore we should. No, we can change the laws, we can make the laws better, and treat people as individuals rather than a potential murderer just because they're from another country.
One observation for those who perhaps weren't at a speech or a event like this for the Prime Minister of Iceland last semester, who mentioned a center-left politician, somebody who you would think would be very sympathetic to immigration, saying that one of the emerging problems in Iceland is 20% of the population that has immigrated for service jobs isn't integrating into the country. And they don't know what to do about it. And that's little Iceland. Iceland, by the way, for those who don't know, has a population about of one congressional district. Now, one statistic that was mentioned of many here was that 90% of the deportations committed no crimes. Are you saying that 90% of the 600,000 people who were deported last year committed no crimes?
No, but the statistic was respect to the increase over what was happening before. So when they come in and they do these surges into Minneapolis or LA or Chicago, who are they picking up from the increase? So there's a baseline, and a lot of the people, it's depending on whether you count just convictions or charges, it's only 30% if you look at just people who have been convicted, and it's over 60% if you look at people with charges in the total population. But when you look at the increase, who is the next person on the list? The next person on the list isn't a serious criminal, and that's the point. Is when we expand this effort and we go after everyone, what does that mean? That means we're going after a bunch of people who haven't done terrible crimes or all the things that they use to justify what they're doing.
But I would argue that, again, every case is different. But a lot of the people that don't have those additional crimes, do have a final order of removal, right? have seen an immigration judge, have been ordered to leave the country. And again, I come back to it. I know I sound like a broken record a little bit. If you're going to ignore the law, then why do we have a speed limit, right? Why do we have any laws if you're just going to pick and choose and say, well, you're right, you know, this individual's been to 4 different judges. They don't have a legal right to be here, but I'm just not going to do that, right? We've seen that in history, particularly over the last administration and more. And worse things occur because of that. Because more and more individuals pick up on this. The cartels pick up on this. And they start flooding people into the country because they know the law's not going to be enforced. And so if you are an immigrant that wants to come here into the United States and you don't want to come legally for any number of reasons, you're willing to come if you've got a better than 60% chance that you're going to stay in the United States. And you're going to subject yourself to the most dangerous journey on earth in the hands of cartels. And if you're a woman, odds are you will be raped repeatedly. That's what happens when you don't enforce the law. If you just say, nah, it doesn't make me feel good. I don't like that. You're putting these people in more and more dangerous. The most humane immigration system says, I'm going to enforce the law. I'm going to make it very clear on how to come to the United States. And that way, it should be a legal way where you're vetted. We understand who you are. We understand why you come into the country and why you want to come here.
Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time, and we want to leave time for our guests to give their closing statements. So we'll begin with Mr. Beer. You're welcome to stay seated or use the podium as you so desire.
I think the biggest confusion about my position is that I am defending a system of unregulated, illegal immigration. No, I want legal immigration. I want people to be here legally, to contribute legally, to be documented. I don't want to ban legal immigration. I don't want illegal immigration like the Trump administration does when they cancel people's status, creating more of a problem, more people to deport from the United States. When I think about what happened under Biden, which has been referenced repeatedly, was that the fault of the people, the lack of a legal immigration system, or was it the fault of the people who oppose legal immigration? And from my standpoint, I was there. I was talking to these people and telling them, look, a lot of people are going to want to come. Trump administration shut down legal immigration. There was no way to come. The last 4 years, there's a bunch of people who have built up demand. People are going to want to come to the United States. And some of them are going to be willing to break the law. So why don't we create a legal way for them to come? And they said, no, we're not going to open the borders. We're not going to let people apply at ports of entry. We're not going to let people apply for visas. They didn't open consulates for a year. And the result was a disaster. It was a disaster. And it was bad for cities because what was Border Patrol doing? They were arresting people and then dumping them on the street with no documents, no way to support themselves. And they told them, you have no right to work. You have to wait at least 180 days after applying for asylum to be able to work. That's not the system I want. I want people to apply in their home countries for visas to be able to travel legally to the United States after being vetted and be able to line up jobs and housing in advance and support themselves. That is a viable system. We can have that system. And instead, we're wasting all of this money, all of this time, all of this arguing on what? A pointless effort to round up a bunch of people who are living their lives peacefully in the United States, many of whom are married to U.S. citizens, part of our lives and part of our communities. It makes no sense to make ourselves poorer and less free through mass deportation. Thank you.
I come back to a couple of themes that I've hit on, which is, I think the question is mass deportation necessary? Again, I referenced it. When you have a historic crisis, as we did for 4 years, then the reaction to that crisis is a historic reaction that the Trump administration is currently undertaking. Is it difficult? Yes. Is it timely? Yes. Is it going to cost money? Yes. None of those reasons are enough to say, well, let's just not do it, right? The American people said no. That's not why we put you in office, in part. There are other reasons, of course. But we want you to right a wrong that we believe occurred during 4 years of the previous administration. And there are laws on the books that allow them to do that. Either you change the laws or you execute the laws. And so what ICE is doing today is removing individuals. Again, I started my remarks here with a quote from President Obama, who, as we all know, sort of the nickname was Deporter in Chief. He's deported more over, again, longer tenure than President Trump has to date, and we'll see what the numbers look like. But, and a lot of people were okay with that. Not everyone. I think there was some criticism at the time, but a lot of people were like, yeah, that's fine. It's okay. We'll do that. Certainly the media was not where they are today with President Obama. The members of Congress, who we just heard, asked a Trump official if he thought he was going to hell for enforcing the law. I'm pretty sure no member of the Obama administration got asked that question, right? And so in some cases, if President Trump's for it, then there's going to be a large portion of individuals that are against it. And again, I think I'll go back to a point I said. We can have a debate on whether or not you think ICE is enforcing the law the right way. Do you like their tactics? Do you like, what you see on TV or not? Clearly the president didn't in Minneapolis, which is why he sent in Tom Homan, and we're starting slowly to see a different environment there. Again, I would contend if you had more jurisdictions, if Minneapolis, if county jails in the state of Minnesota and in Minneapolis, going back 6 months ago, said, I'll allow ICE into my jail setting. I have an illegal alien that has committed a crime in Minneapolis, burglary, whatever it might be. I'm going to let ICE come pick that individual up in a jail setting and remove them from the country. That is a lot safer than ICE. What takes one officer to do that, maybe 2 officers to do that. Now we have to send 20 officers into a neighborhood to pick up that same individual. That is what a sanctuary city does. And they're all over, including here. They're all over. And so that is where you get the chaos. That's where you get a lot of the images. And that's where we're getting the debate right now of, well, I really don't like what I see on TV. I don't like how ICE is doing this. And that's a fine debate to have. I would say that normally you wouldn't have that if you didn't have sanctuary jurisdictions. But the mission of ICE, again, I gave you a poll number. The mission of ICE is still what the American people want to see. They have a mission given to them by Congress, unless it changes, which I'm not for. Their specific mission is to remove individuals that don't have a legal right to be here, full stop. Now you can say, well, I need to prioritize. And the president says this. Other members of the administration say this. We're going to prioritize those that are national security threats and public safety threats. But that does not mean that you ignore everyone else. And when you do that, there are catastrophic consequences to doing that.
Thank you, gentlemen, both so much. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for coming, and grab a cookie on your way out. But would you please join me in thanking our wonderful guests one last time?